For the first time since 1991, the Seahawks took part in joint practices, kicking things off in Nashville against the Titans on Wednesday. What went down on day one? We're going to be breaking it all down here on our latest edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening in nearby Richland, Washington, or in Madison, Wisconsin, in Packers land. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks taking part in joint practices for the first time since way back in 1991, even before the turn of the century, against the Titans, their first practice on Wednesday. And this was always something that I wondered why Pete Carroll was so against, but Pete Carroll's entire tenure, the Seahawks never took part in any joint practices with teams. And certainly the location of Seattle may have something to do with it. I think there were other factors at play because Mike Macdonald comes in as the new coach, and in the spring, as he was talking about today, they quickly put together this plan to go take advantage of the opportunity to have joint practices with one of the teams that was on their preseason schedule. They ended up reaching that agreement with the Titans and had their first practice today in Nashville. And as you would expect, this is not a game format necessarily. Guys are not going to be tackling players all the way to the ground, but it's as close as you're going to get. And the reason that I've always valued joint practices is the fact that you can get starters quality reps while having more control over the environment. And what I mean by that, in preseason games, you're still tackling. Quarterbacks still are free to hit, at least within the rules that the NFL has. It is a real football game. You can't necessarily control the environment the way that you want to. And when you have these joint practices, you can still have the red jersey on, or in the case of the Seahawks, their retro blue Seahawks uniforms. You can still have that mechanism there to protect the quarterbacks, to prevent them from getting hit. You can still do thud control where guys are hitting hard, but they're not bringing guys to the ground. You can have a quick whistle. You have all the control over that environment. So this is a great litmus test for Mike Macdonald and his defense, installing a new scheme this year. And he certainly was encouraged by most of what he saw today, but of course, there's still a few things that he was not necessarily happy about that are going to have to be fixed on film. Take a listen.
It felt like we played the run pretty well up front. There's some things that we got to play better on, some schemes on the edge and second level. It's tough to tell what's happening inside in real time, but it felt like the guys played the blocks pretty well, and we circled the ball. And there's a couple explosives that we're going to want to look and see in the pass game that we got to fix.
And of course, that last statement there, that's the one that's going to make Seahawk fans maybe have some PTSD, because the last several years, one of the big problems for this defense in the end of Pete Carroll's tenure is the inability to eliminate explosives. Now, I was unable to go to Nashville. I was planning to go, and unfortunately, my car broke down in the middle of Idaho on Sunday afternoon while I was heading back home. So I ended up being stranded for a few days. That prevented me from getting to Nashville, but still have been able to see a lot of clips coming out of the practice, at least when it was open to film. Have been able to talk to a number of people that were on site and have a pretty good idea of what we saw in this practice. And the main theme here is that the defense up front, they got pushed around at times, but generally the run defense was pretty solid. They made some good plays on the back end, but there were still too many explosives. So that is going to be the one area that Mike Macdonald, moving into tomorrow's practice, and obviously when they get close to the regular season, they've got to continue hammering out their assignments, the coverages they're in, make sure their communication's on point, because a lot of times explosives result not necessarily because the scheme is being ran, but because of the communication and people not being able to execute their assignments properly. So all these are things that with a new scheme are going to continue to be a flexible situation where Mike Macdonald is going to have to play it by ear and see where things are at. But as he was saying today, it's a good thing if you make the mistakes now, because then we can go back to the drawing board and correct them. So then the regular season, hopefully these mistakes are not happening. So again, this is the value that you are getting from these joint practices. You are getting these quality reps for your starters with better environment control. You don't have to worry about Geno Smith and Sam Howell getting blasted, or at least they shouldn't be getting hit. They're going to have their special royal blue jerseys on. You're going to get the reps for your offensive line going against players like Jeffrey Simmons that you would not be getting in a preseason game for a couple days. There's a reason Macdonald says the starters probably aren't going to be playing on Saturday when they actually have the preseason game, because their preseason game is these two practices. These are the reps that are going to get them ready for the regular season. And I think it's worth noting that this is a great opportunity to get work in without helping other teams. When you have preseason games, and all you have to do is look on my social media or a number of people that cover the NFL, preseason games, all 22 becomes available and it gets around, and all 32 NFL teams have the ability to access all 22 film from every single preseason game. That's what they have their scouting department, their pro scouting department doing. They have them examining which players could potentially be cut by other teams that may be a fit on the Seahawks 53-man roster. So that goes for every single other team out there. These reps are not going to be on film and accessible for the other 30 teams. So Mike Macdonald's got to be looking at this as, a two-sided win here. Not only can we control the environment and hopefully limit injuries, but we can also make it that we're getting these really good reps for first, second, third teamers, and we don't have to worry about the New York Jets or the Baltimore Ravens or any of those other teams being able to get their hands on practice footage from these joint practices. It's not going to be readily available like all 22 film is to all 32 teams. So you can get some really good evaluation in on the entire landscape of your roster without having to sacrifice your state secrets and have other teams be able to see what you are doing. So these provide incredible value while still being able to do your preseason games for the lower players on the roster. Those are still valuable snaps for those guys, but this is a chance to really get the starters out there and really just evaluate your roster as a whole. And I think the other thing that's worth noting when you're talking about the value of these joint practices, it is the detour that it provides from the monotony of playing against your own teammates. We saw it last week when Fight Club broke out during one of Seattle's padded practices. You get tired of hitting the same guys over and over again, and it creates enough strife that eventually guys start chirping at each other, and it turns into more than that. You start having punches being thrown at Jake Bobo. You start having helmets thrown around. And so the opportunity to be able to play against another team, just going all the way to Nashville, knowing, hey, I'm not going to be hitting Reek Woolen anymore if I'm DK Metcalf. I'm not going to be going against Trey Brown anymore. I'm going against somebody totally different. I think it provides more benefits than just the fact that you're testing yourselves against other competition. It's just the fact you are not going to have to worry about the staleness and the animosity that comes with going against your teammates for 3 straight weeks. That is something that's universal in football. And really what it boils down to, this is a great opportunity to get the work in you need to have done and be able to get some good reps for your starters, not have it available to the other 30 teams that are out there because practice film isn't going to be readily available for those teams. And also the chance to really work on situational football. And I think Geno Smith put it best here. They capped off practice today. Now, I've talked to 3 different reporters that were on site. 2 of them told me DK Metcalf scored on the final play of the scrimmage. One said, no, I think he was down at the 1-yard line. The refs ruled him down at the 1. So right now it'd be 2-1 in terms of whether DK Metcalf scored or not. But it was a long drive in a 2-minute scenario that Geno Smith and company were able to orchestrate. And as he talked about after practice, that is maybe the most crucial part in these joint practices. You're not playing in the preseason, obviously. You want to get these drives in. You want to feel what it's like to go through a 10, 12, 14-play drive. And as you can see, once you get down there in the red zone, guys are going to be a little tired, but you got to finish. You want to see what that feels like. And so it was great to have that opportunity out here on the field. Again, that coming from Geno Smith after practice. And I'm sure Geno Smith would tell you that DK Metcalf was in the end zone as well. Again, I talked to 3 reporters. It was 2-1 that Metcalf scored on that play. So that's how we're going to rule it right now. The DK Metcalf, if there was instant replay, would have scored a touchdown there. So an impressive end of the practice for the Seahawks, and they will get another opportunity tomorrow. But before we get to that second practice on tomorrow's show, there's plenty more to discuss coming out of Nashville. Some of the sights and sounds at the first training camp practice, a joint practice that the Seahawks have had since 1991. We'll dive into some of those other takeaways that'll be coming up next year on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. As a site manager for Seahawks on SI, LinkedIn Jobs is my go-to to post writing positions to land top candidates. They've made the process so easy and seamless, and I brought in a number of great writers by doing so. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. In fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process quicker and easier. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedInNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedInNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in, and thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And make sure for your second listen to check out the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get your daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies out there so you can win your league this upcoming season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Seahawks kicking off their first joint practices since way back in 1991. I was 2 years old at that point, so I can't tell you that I remember what that joint practice setup was like for the Seahawks. But here we are now in 2024. The Seahawks traveling to Nashville to battle the Titans for a couple of days of joint practices. Then Saturday, they obviously have the second preseason game. As I mentioned a few moments ago, do not expect to see starters, at least many starters. I would be surprised if any starters for the Seahawks are playing in this game. And the Titans, who knows how they're going to handle it. But the reps are really going to be coming on Wednesday and Thursday. So they got their first practice in today, going against each other, a lot of one-on-ones. And, of course, the team session where you really get a chance to test your mettle against other competition and see where you are at. And obviously Mike Macdonald was encouraged, but had plenty of things that he was nitpicking about with his defense. The offense had their moments, but certainly there's a lot of room to improve. And as far as what's coming out of Nashville, again, due to crazy circumstances, I was supposed to be there. Unfortunately, that did not happen. I wasn't even back home until my flight would have already left to go to Nashville. So I had to cancel all those things. But nonetheless, I'm still tapped in, had an opportunity to talk to some guys that have been at the training camp joint practice today and gotten some extra insight, watched some clips as well, just to get an idea how things went. And I can tell you right now, the first thing that jumps out to me with where things stand on an individual player basis right now, Byron Murphy II, I know that you don't want to put too much pressure on a young guy, but the hype train is not slowing down anytime soon for Seattle's latest first-round pick. Going back and watching the tape from Saturday's win over the Chargers, he was flat out unblockable at times. And then when he was doubled, the drop knee technique that he is so good at, good luck moving him. He has already really surpassed what I expected to see this point. It's just preseason games, obviously, but everything coming out of today, all kinds of talk about him dishing out filthy swim moves and his quick first step, just penetrating gaps left and right. One-on-one drills, the Titans could not block him. The more that I watch this kid, and I am not a big comp person when it comes to player comps. I think every player has a very unique skill set. So normally I stay away from them. Sometimes I'll dish out player comps, but every once in a while there is a player comp that I just cannot get myself around without talking. And with Byron Murphy II, we had Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl, on here talking about this earlier, that you look at Grady Jarrett from the Falcons and there's some similarities in terms of build and skill set. And that's kind of been the comp that everybody's been looking at. And I can see some carryover there. But now that I've gotten a better idea of watching Byron Murphy II, what he really brings to the table, the elite athlete that he is, I cannot shake it. I see John Randall. when I watch this kid play. And if John Randall ends up being the ceiling for this kid, and we're talking about a guy that had 137 and a half career sacks and made the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Maybe he's not Aaron Donald, but he's that next tier down of those undersized 290-pound interior defenders that offensive linemen absolutely hated having to go against because of his motor, his quickness, his tenacity. John Randall's one of the best defensive tackles, at least from a pass rushing standpoint, that's ever played in the NFL. So that might be lofting too much praise at this point, but that is what I see when I watch Byron Murphy. That quick first step, the motor. He doesn't maybe have the same, I haven't seen the same, I don't know, anger maybe is the right word. I haven't seen that necessarily yet to this point. John Randall played angry, but I think when you look at the way that these guys get the job done, the types of moves, the quickness, and the overall power, the ability to win leverage. I mean, John Randall was a smaller DT. He was 6'1", 290. So Byron Murphy is a very similar build. I see a lot of similar traits between these guys. I just can't shake that player comp. Every time I was watching his plays, his snaps on that All-22 the other day, I just kept thinking, that kid looks like John Randall. When you watch him on the practice field and just how explosive he is in the individual drills, you see John Randall. So I got to throw that out there. He certainly had another strong day. Everything that I have heard is that he was unblockable in one-on-ones. That's carrying over from what we have seen in Renton at Seattle's training camp practices. He looked that way on Saturday. So again, the hype train is not going to be slowing down for Byron Murphy II anytime soon. Second big takeaway for me, and I mentioned DK Metcalf. Look, we're just going to say he scored a touchdown on that play because, again, 2 of the 3 people that were there today that saw it told me that he scored. So we're just going to say that DK Metcalf scored a touchdown. But everything that I'm seeing on the one-on-ones that have been sent to me, everything I'm hearing from the people that were on site, the receivers you expect are going to hold up against other teams, but they held their own today. DK Metcalf had a big day. Jackson Smith and Jigba had a bunch of catches in one-on-ones and in the team period. Jake Bobo, there's a play that you can see going around. A couple people have posted where he did a phenomenal job setting up a vertical and then bouncing back outside towards the sideline, and the corner was still running away from the play. It was just a perfectly ran route. You are seeing the depth and the talent that the Seahawks have at the wide receiver position, and that shouldn't necessarily come as a surprise. And the Titans have a few guys in their cornerback group that were drafted fairly high. This is not going to be one of the better secondaries Seattle faces, but still, this is another NFL team you're playing against, starting caliber players. And by all accounts, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jake Bobo and company played extremely well today. The offense was able to click. The passing game did a lot of good things. So it's a really good litmus test where they're at. And Tyler Lockett didn't do anything today other than catching off a jugs machine at the end. So they're waiting to get him back into the mix here, dealing with what Mike Macdonald said it was a little bit of something. Doesn't sound like it's a significant injury, but they're just trying to be cautious with him here in mid-August. But this is a really good receiving core. Everybody knew that going in, but another opportunity for them to really show where that talent is rising as the cream of the crop here, giving problems for other teams. And by the way, they play better corners normally in practice, what Seattle has at that position. So they were able to go out there and get the job done. And last but not least, staying on the offensive side of the football, this does not come as a surprise to me at all. I've been saying this on the show for the last 2+ weeks, that I feel like a contender is starting to really seize the third down running back job. And I know that a lot of our listeners have been saying Kenny McIntosh has more burst. He's more of a slithery runner. He ran hard on Saturday night. Those are all true. But George Holani has had the better training camp as an all-around player. And quite frankly, he's been the better player running the football, at least at the 13 practices that I have attended. George Holani has been the better runner. He has been far superior in pass protection. I was told he had a couple of outstanding reps in one-on-one pass protection, blitz pickup against Tennessee's linebackers today, made a couple nice runs during the scrimmage period as well. He was getting work with Geno Smith in the ones before Kenny McIntosh did. I try not to put too much stock into it, but this has been gradually happening the last few weeks, that George Holani has really started to seize that job. And you hear some of the other reporters in the press conference asking about Holani. The reason they are is because he just continues to make it extremely difficult to ignore what he is doing out there, adding that special teams tackle that he had the other day. I think there's a very good chance that both McIntosh and Helani are on this football team. But right now, as things are set up, if three guys are going to be active on game day, to me, George Helani is the one that is going to be the running back that is active as number 3. Because if you want to be a third down back in this league, you've got to be able to pass protect. And that has been a problem. Kenny McIntosh blew 2 blocks on Saturday night against blitz pickup. You can't make mistakes like that and expect to be the third down running back. By all accounts, George Helani has been fantastic in pass pro. He's also gotten after it when he's been asked to run block. The block that he had on D. Eskridge's jet sweep Saturday night was the one that Mike Macdonald said on Monday got him most fired up in that game. So he continues to do all the little things right. He's checking off every box. So whether fans want to hear it or not, again, I could see Kenny McIntosh still being on this roster, and maybe in the next few weeks he ends up closing that gap. But it feels like right now it's going the other direction, that George Helani is really starting to grab the bull by the horns here, and he's starting to seize this third running back job because of his hard-nosed running style, his pass protection, and all things created equal. Both these guys are really good receiving running backs. McIntosh might have a little bit more of an ability to slide out in the slot and do things like that. But George Helani had almost 90 catches in college at Boise State and only 3 drops. He is a very soft-handed running back out of the backfield too. So right now it just seems like the coaching staff is signaling it in what they're saying in press conferences, what they're doing on the field, and just what we've seen the last 3 weeks. It does feel like George Helani now has got a pretty strong grip on that third down running back job heading towards this second preseason game coming up on Saturday in Nashville. Up next, one of the biggest surprises each of the last 2 training camps for the Seahawks in the secondary has been Artie Burns, maybe even more so this year as he's been getting first-team reps in the nickel position. I had a chance to catch up with Artie at the VMAC during training camp. Going to have a snippet of that interview and a chance to look at what he did last season in his first year playing extensive snaps inside. We'll be diving into that up next here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy and also keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, steering wheel covers, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in, and thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Over the past couple of years, I don't know that there has been a Seahawk who has done a better job of blowing expectations out of the water than Artie Burns. In his first year with the Seahawks, he battled hamstring injuries and played in just 3 games. He did start that training camp off well and then got hurt, and really it ended up being a lost season for him. At that point, I didn't expect that Artie Burns was going to be back in the Seahawks uniform, and yet late last summer, they brought him back into the fold. He decided to move into the nickel. It was his choice to ask the coaching staff whether or not he could give that a try. He had played less than 50 career snaps in the slot. Didn't play there in college at Miami either. So nobody knew what to expect. And yet Artie Burns ended up being a pretty darn reliable slot corner for the Seahawks, playing over 200 snaps in the position last year. The first extensive action he'd had there in his entire NFL career. And you look at what he did. He allowed 17 catches, no touchdowns, had a pass breakup. Passer rating against him was 99.6. So it's not like he had lights out numbers necessarily, but not giving up any touchdowns, had that pass breakup. He was able to blitz and create some pressures for the Seahawks in those situations. He really fit that slot corner position way better than I think anybody could have anticipated. And then you look at where he's at now. This has been an even bigger surprise to me because Pete Carroll was one of Artie Burns' biggest advocates. And so going into the season, even though Burns was re-signed in March, I looked going into training camp at Burns as a player that was probably squarely on the outside looking in, especially after drafting Nehemiah Pritchett and DJ James out of Auburn in April. And yet here we are now 3+ weeks into training camp. Artie Burns has gotten a ton of reps of the first team playing in the slot, and he's been great in training camp. There's been a few of you, our valued listeners, that have messaged me on social media and said, we kept seeing 23 make plays. That is what he has done all of training camp. Artie Burns has been really impressive. He had an interception against Sam Howell that he peeled off his receiver, fully extended, jumped up and got the ball for a pick. He's had a bunch of other pass breakups. He has been deadly as a blitzer in practices. He times it really well. He's a really nice change of pace when Devin Witherspoon's playing on the outside. You can do a lot of the same stuff, but he's a slightly different player in terms of what he can bring to the table. But he offers a lot of the traits that Mike Macdonald wants there. He's an aggressive player who actually had some safety background earlier in his football career. That may explain why he's been able to make what I look at as a very rare transition. You do not see cornerbacks that play outside corner 6-7 years into their career. You don't see them move inside to the slot where you have to have super great change of direction skills and athleticism to be able to handle those two-way routes. You see him move to safety. That's typically what you see. It's not normal to see this transition, yet Artie Burns has done a fantastic job there. I think he is a lock to make this football team at this point, and I really enjoyed the opportunity. Had to split up the interview with a couple other reporters because he was in demand, but had the opportunity to chat with Artie about his journey to the slot, how that went down, and expectations for this upcoming season. Take a listen.
So slot position, we'll just start off talking about that. I know you hadn't played it very much before last year, but you've been playing there a lot this training camp, over 200 snaps last year. Do you feel like that position has really become a natural one for you at this point?
Yeah, it's becoming real fun for me. I played some safety, in high school, so it kind of I have some familiarity with it. Being close to the box and stuff like that, playing those positions.
Do you feel like the way that Mike Macdonald's using that position, and then obviously the way Devin Witherspoon plays that spot, do you feel like your skill set really fits in what he's wanting there in terms of the aggressiveness?
Yeah, most definitely. Like the aggressiveness that he used in the scheme, the blitzes and the disguises and stuff like that. It lets you, show your versatility and stuff like that. We play a lot of zone coverage, some man. You can put your full talent on tape.
What was that conversation like with the last coaching staff when they were saying, "Hey, we want to slide you inside"? Were they talking about the different skill set and how they thought it was going to fit in there? Or that had to be a little bit difficult because you've played your entire career outside as a boundary corner.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny. We actually were down, down on DBs, during camp, and we needed somebody to go in. I was like, "Coach, hey, I know how to work that position. I've been paying attention in meetings and stuff like that." He was like, "Go ahead and take a shot at it," and I was out there.
Last year, obviously, Pete Carroll's staff had a ton of success here, but with that discipline, being more detail-oriented, do you feel like that was something that really – do you think that was the biggest reason the defense had the struggles it had the last couple of years?
Yeah, we had a lot of young players, so, the transition from college to NFL, the discipline also is needed also. Pete had that, but I think Mike is really enforcing that on certain guys and stuff like that and holding them to that standard, and guys that holding up to it.
Mike's been talking about iron sharpening iron, and you guys now Jackson Smith and Jigba year 2 seems like he's taking a big leap. You've got DK, Tyler, Jake, and some of the catches that he's made, and playing that nickel spot especially now. You've played outside as well. Just how much is that preparing, especially going against Ryan Grubb's offense with the things they're bringing? How much is that helping you from an individual standpoint, be able to take your game to another level right now?
It helped me a lot. Jackson in particular, he gotten a whole lot better. The way the savviness he had gotten better in his route running. He's looking more quicker, and he getting more smarter. He's been in the league his second year. And all those guys is getting much better. But the scheme is helping them exploit their talents, and they've been doing a good job at it.
Everyone was expecting this team to be a lot more physical, and we saw yesterday that definitely showed up on the field. But do you feel like, compared to other staffs that you've been on, that there's more emphasis on that mental side of the game? We saw full practice that you guys had out there just doing walkthrough. And how much is that benefiting you guys when that's not something that is usually delved in as much by an NFL coach instead?
Well, I'm familiar with it because I played in Pittsburgh. The Steelers, they
did a lot of stuff.
Yeah, they a lot of physicality in camp. So it kind of flashbacked me a little bit, and I love it. You know, the consistency we have at getting better every day with physicality and just coming every day ready to know that it's going to be a hard day to work.
You mentioned in the youth, and now that you've played outside and inside, and you're one of the veterans in this group, what have been your impressions so far of the rookies that have come in, Nehemiah, DJ, and Carlton Johnson, what he's been doing as well? Some of these guys that can play both inside and out.
Yeah, that's a first. You know, you don't have a lot of times when a rookie class come in, they can both play nickel and corner. Yeah. You know, so they showing their versatility and they making plays. You know, that's another good thing in a new scheme. You know, so I see they cylinders. They could do a lot of things in this league. They just keep on standing out and just keep getting better.
As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. We'll have another show coming up tomorrow, diving into day 2 of joint practices in Nashville. What went down for the Seahawks? They continue to fine-tune things for their second preseason game and the season opener on September 8th against the Broncos. Make sure you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Go Hawks.